Hello and welcome to Too Many Movies, the podcast where we discuss DVDs, Blu-rays, and even the occasional VHS tape. I'm your host, Hal, and today is going to be a continuation on my Stranger Things watch through. So, a couple episodes ago, I talked about Season 1 of Stranger Things, and I was debating whether to keep the Blu-ray VHS pack that I had of it, and I ultimately decided to not keep it in my collection. But I decided, hey, I might as well watch through the other seasons as well. And, well, I gotta give my thoughts somehow. I can't just watch them and then just leave it at that. I need to give my opinions on stuff. So, anyway, I watched through Season 2, and I gotta say, it's a lot worse than I remember. So going into Season 2, I literally remembered nothing. Like, I remember when I first watched Season 1, I remembered liking Season 1. I haven't rewatched Season 3 yet, but I do remember a lot from Season 3, and not in a good way. I don't remember liking Season 3. Season 2, I genuinely forgot a lot of what happened, just because none of it stuck with me. And yeah, just watching through it again, there are things I do like, quote unquote, but overall, it's a case of, I think no matter what, it's a case of the fact that it's continuing in any way, shape, or form is just not right. As I said with my Season 1 review, you know, I liked these characters enough. I liked the show well enough, but not enough that really expanding upon it would do it any justice. Because there was a lot to it that I didn't like. I didn't even really like Season 1 as much as other people do. Like, I think it's a fine season of television, but nothing more than just fine. And, you know, just the fact that it's continuing, and it just gets even worse. And because I don't like it as much, the fact that Season 2 comes around and everything is not as good as the first one, my thoughts are even lower than before. So I'm very, very critical of this season. And it's mostly just because it all feels like we're going through the same motions. Oh, we have the kids with their own thing. We have Nancy and Jonathan doing their own subplot. We have Hopper doing his own shenanigans. And after a while, it's just like, oh God, I don't care. I really don't. Like, Will Byers is such a boring character when you get down to it. There's a reason he went missing in the first season, because that's all he had. It's like, that's all he had. That's all he had as a character was missing boy. You know, and then you bring him back this season and he gets more screen time, but like, what do they do with him? Nothing. They're just like, oh, he's like possessed by the scary smoke monster from the Upside Down. It's like, okay, why? Like, I don't understand. Like, what even does this monster want? Like, what is the threat here from the Upside Down? Who are these creatures? Why should I care? Why are they just like killers? What's the deal with them? Like, I know they're evil because they're like scary creatures who don't speak, and they just roar, and they're like, oh, so ethereal, and like we can't understand them. But it's like, okay, why? Like, that's never really explained who these creatures are. I know why the government is the villain. Like, I don't like any of the government villain, like federal characters, like feds, like, because they're just, you know, mustache twirling evil assholes. They're just like, oh, we're the government. Ooh, we hate people. We're going to make things bad for you. But like, I get that. Like, they want to cover up stuff. They want to cover up them being assholes. It's like, okay, I get that. I even sort of get, you know, characters like Billy, like in the first season, Troy. Like, I get it. They're bully characters meant to just antagonize the main protagonists. I get that. I don't like them. I don't think they're great characters, but I understand what their motivations are, or lack thereof, because the writers are just terrible at writing these characters. I get that. But I don't understand who these creatures are. I don't understand who the Demogorgon is. Like, what his deal is. Like, why is he trying to go to the real world? Why is this smoke monster, like, trying to go to the real world? Why is it possessing Will? Like, why? And, you know, you might say, oh, we're just not supposed to understand these creatures. It's like, okay, weak explanation. And also, it's like, well, then, I don't know, that's not really scary. It's just like, oh, we don't understand. And, you know, some people might think that's scary. I think that's copping out. Like, oh, you just don't want to explain shit. Like, you're just too lazy to explain shit because you realize, oh, we have to keep going with this bullshit when we were really just not even trying with season 1. Actually, that's a lie. They were trying with season 1. They just weren't very good at it. But now they have to try even harder to just, like, pump out more bullshit so then stupid teenagers and stupid fans can eat it all up and Netflix can make more money. It's like, I'm sorry if I sound too cynical with season 2, but I've been hurt before by sequels, by continuations, by just any form of media whose only purpose is to continue where there doesn't need continuing. This is the season where we have the Elle Goes to Chicago episode that nobody likes. I will say this. One thing I did remember from season 2 was, like, there is that weird detour episode when Elle goes on her own little adventure to Chicago because the writers really wanted to make a backdoor pilot for this show, for this gang, like having this gang with where one of them's like has special powers. It's like, oh, we can have this cool spin-off show beyond Stranger Things. It's like, all right, but the appeal of Stranger Things is this close-knit group of characters. Anybody else, we don't care about. Yeah, it's like when the most random Star Wars characters get spin-offs, and it's just like, I don't care. I don't want to see a show about Cassian Andor. I don't want to see a movie about Han Solo. I don't want to see a show about Boba Fett. It's like, I don't want to see this shit. I like seeing them as, like, characters in other movies. Well, not Cassian Andor, because Rogue One sucks, but, like, I don't care to see them fleshed out. That's not what the universe was made to focus on. We weren't meant to focus on Han Solo. He was always supposed to be a side character. So, I mean, I'm going off on a tangent on the possibility that this would have been a TV show. Obviously, nothing happened of it because nobody liked this episode of Elle finding this other girl who had powers because she was experimented on, but she also has different powers because she can make people see things. It's like, oh, okay, that's weird that you can have different powers. I don't know if that's expanded upon in seasons 3 or 4, but you know what? I don't care. I'm not there yet. It's just the same, but worse in season 2. You know, you get so many scenes where it feels like it's trying to be derivative of season 1, where it's like, oh, we got to revisit, we got to have that same magic that season 1 had. Now, as I said, I'm not even really a big fan of season 1, so I'm not really all that impressed. But even I understood the impact of that. Like, the impact of seeing Joyce, like, tie Christmas lights to her wall and then write the alphabet. It's like, that's a cool image. That's cool imagery. Here, they try to replace that by having, like, oh, we're going to, like, tape drawings all around the house of, like, a tunnel system under Hawkins. It's like, it doesn't have that strong of an imagery when compared to, like, the lights up on the wall and the alphabet. It's like, that's strong imagery. You know, then you get, like, just new characters to add to the roster, but none of them are that interesting. I don't care about Max. I really don't care about Billy. I don't care about Bob, even though, I mean, technically I sort of cared about Bob because he was the only character that wasn't unlikable. So naturally, he was the one who got killed off, you know, just for shock value. You know, because that's what you do. That's good writing. When characters you like are killed off for shock value, that's, I mean, whatever. Like, I give a shit. Like Bob had any impact on the show. actually, what's really funny about Bob as a character is that we're supposed to like him, but then it is his fault as to how Will gets possessed by the smoke monster. It's like, am I supposed to not like Bob then? Like, what's the deal with that? Like, that's kind of messed up. Because he's just like, oh, you got to stand up for yourself and say, don't bother me, leave me alone. And then Will does exactly that, and it backfires immediately. But, like, Bob is never seen as the villain because of that. Like, he's never called out because of that. Am I supposed to? Like, it's just so confusing. And then Billy is portrayed as, like, this really bad apple. But then he also gets a scene where his father calls him the F slur, and we're supposed to feel bad for him. It's like really confusing characterizations in this season. I don't get it. Like, I don't know. Like, why include these characters if you're not going to do anything interesting with them? Like, Billy's just kind of an asshole, and then, oh, his father calls him the F slur and, like, holds him up against the wall in a threatening way. It's like, oh, well, that's not threatening. That's just badly written asshole characters to make another asshole character not seem like that big of an asshole. It's like, this isn't good writing. This isn't interesting character work. It's nothing. It's just garbage for Netflix to dump on their streaming service and for people to be like, oh, I can watch this in a weekend. And that's exactly what happened. I think this came out, Halloween weekend of 2017, and people finished Stranger Things season 2 in that one weekend. It's like, because that's what Netflix does. They just drop a season in a weekend and then it's forgotten like 2 weeks later. Sometimes they have lasting impact. Like, I feel like Squid Game had kind of a longevity run, and obviously Stranger Things, because it has several seasons. But that doesn't really mean anything because they still just don't have the impact that they could have if they didn't just drop their whole season in one weekend. It's just something that bugs me about Netflix. One of the many numerous things that bug me about Netflix, but whatever. There's really not much else I can add to season 2 of Stranger Things. I know it sounds like I'm just repeating myself when I'm saying, like, they didn't need to continue, but they really did not need to continue, and it's just frustrating to watch. There's just so many things that are, like, so apparent that make it seem like the writers just had no idea where they wanted to take Stranger Things after season 1, and so they're just shitting out whatever they can and just going with whatever the first draft is. In some ways, I feel kind of bad because they're just forced to make this garbage, and the studios will be the winners in the end because they're getting the most money out of this, and it's just a shame. So the cool thing about Stranger Things season 2 is it is also a season of Netflix television that has a Blu-ray release, and it's kind of similar to the season 1 Blu-ray release where it's in the shape of like a VHS tape. Unfortunately, I have no interest in adding it to my collection. I mean, if that wasn't so obvious. I got rid of the first season, and that's probably the most positive I've been towards Stranger Things, so clearly Stranger Things season 2 will not be added to my collection. Anyway, be on the lookout for my discussions on seasons 3 and 4. I don't know, whenever I get to watching them. Okay, so not only did I want to talk about season 2 of Stranger Things today, I also wanted to talk about a DVD in my collection. So I've said before, this is a podcast about my movie collection. One of the main reasons I started it was because I have a whole shit ton of just like DVDs, Blu-rays, and VHS tapes that I've just never watched. And so I feel like this is a good opportunity for me to go through these movies and finally watch them. And I haven't gone through this pile of DVDs that I have since Stealth. Since the episode on Stealth. That was the last episode I did on one of these movies that I started the podcast on. So it's nice to finally get back into one of those. So I watched a movie called The Mouse That Roared. a Peter Sellers political comedy from the mid-20th century. No, it's not Dr. Strangelove. It's called The Mouse That Roared. It's basically about this small country that is going bankrupt, and their last-ditch effort to get more money is to declare war on the United States and then lose and then reap the benefits of foreign aid and stuff like that. It's essentially the producers and, like I said, Dr. Strangelove, but this came out before both of those movies. And unfortunately, it's also not as good as either of those movies. I was very not impressed with The Mouse That Roared. So, one thing I'll start off by saying I really liked about it was its clever logo. So, it's a Columbia movie, and it has like the Columbia lady at the beginning who's holding the torch. But they made it so it's like a live action woman, and then she like runs away because like a mouse walks onto the set and she gets scared by it. It's like, okay, that's kind of clever. I like that. But like, I feel like that's kind of the only clever thing I really laughed at in the movie, because like the rest of it was chuckle worthy for sure. I would describe this movie as chuckle worthy. It has moments where I'm like, oh, that's very funny. That's kind of quaint. That's kind of neat. Like, yeah, it's a comedy. Like, this is funny. But none of it was ever really, like, laugh out loud funny. None of it was ever, like, really just having me, like, holding my sides from laughing so hard. And like, a couple episodes ago, I just did on Blazing Saddles. Like, that's a movie where, like, I remember so many jokes and so many gags and so many scenes. This didn't really have any of that. There was no joke that really stood out to me. There was no, like, gag that really stood out to me. Like, occasionally there was something that I found was pretty funny. Like, there's this weird incest joke at the beginning where it's just like, oh, the founder of the country is known as the father of the country because he really is the father of the country, because that explains why so many of Peter Sellers' characters look similar. It's like, oh, they're all related. Isn't that funny? It's like, I feel like it was a weirdly, it caught me off guard. It was a very weird joke, and it could have been funny, but like, it's just delivered weirdly, and it just comes out of nowhere. Like, there's this joke where Peter Sellers is talking to this Frenchman, and the Frenchman is obviously subtitled. So, like, he's speaking entirely in French, and all his dialogue is being said in the subtitles in English. And then Peter Sellers is just saying "oui" to everything he says, like, oh, oui. And then at the end of it, one of the other soldiers is just like, oh, what was he saying? And Peter Sellers says, I don't know, I don't speak French. And at the bottom it says, I don't know, I don't speak French in the subtitles. It's like, all right, that's clever, I guess. I feel like that's kind of where the movie's at its strongest, is it in its like little clever little jokes, but they're not like jumping out at me, and they're not that memorable. Like, I'll probably forget about these jokes in like a week or so, and they're little jokes I've remembered for years now. Like, any joke or line delivery from someone like Groucho Marx, I still remember to this day, even though some of those Marx Brothers movies I haven't seen in years. You know, there's the numerous line deliveries in Mel Brooks movies. Just the best comedies, in my opinion, are movies where it's not just the jokes that are memorable about them. Like, I remember so many aspects about Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein than just the jokes. I like a lot of the jokes in those movies, but I also remember a lot of character moments, a lot of set design gags, a lot of just other things that go into making a comedy. There's really not much to The Mouse That Roared, like, now that I'm really like struggling to think about it, because it's just like I said, there's just not a lot of really that funny jokes. Like, there's jokes that I know are funny, I'm just not laughing that hard with them. And the story itself is just kind of blasé. It's like, oh, they end up winning the war just because the U.S. has like this bomb drill that they're doing, and it's just like complicated. And I can see it's trying to have like political commentary, but it's not. It's not Doctor Strangelove. Like, that's the main takeaway I got from this movie. It feels like it's trying to be Doctor Strangelove, but Doctor Strangelove came out after this and did it so much better. It did the whole comedy and political allegory so much better, because what made Doctor Strangelove so unique, and I won't go into too much detail because I feel like I should save that for its own episode, but what made it so unique was its balance of comedy and real world politics. Like, it was somewhat believable in Doctor Strangelove, despite it being kind of kooky. Whereas this was just really, really kooky, and it still wanted to have a point. So in that case, it's kind of like when I was saying with Blazing Saddles a while back, like how it's trying to have a point, but it's at its most funniest when it's not trying to have a point. But with that said, Blazing Saddles has really, really funny jokes in there, whereas like this doesn't really have that. This is not on the same level as Blazing Saddles. Jean Seberg is in this movie. She was apparently a big actress back in the day. I thought she kind of sucked in this movie, which is kind of weird. She's like this cultural acting icon, and yet I thought she was terrible in this movie. I was much more impressed with Peter Sellers, who I love Peter Sellers. Every movie I've seen him in, he's been fantastic. Even in a movie I despise like Lolita, he's the best part in that movie because he's really, really good. But again, he's really good in this movie in all three parts. I really like those characters, but I don't know. I like his characters in Doctor Strangelove more because they feel like more fleshed out in that movie. Like, I remember Mandrake. I remember the President. I remember Doctor Strangelove. Doctor Strangelove only gets 2 scenes in his movie, and I remember infinitely more about him than any of the characters that Peter Sellers played in this movie. I remember liking him well enough in this movie because he's a good actor, but I don't remember anything about the characters. I will say, so I think I'm going to move on to talking about the DVD itself, just because it's worth pointing out. This cover art is bad. It's like photoshopped, but like the photographs of all 3 Peter Sellers' characters are just really, really just badly contrasted, and like, I'm looking at this now. The actual piece of paper that is the cover is not cut properly. And I know cutting. I work in printing, and this is like a terrible cut. You can see the white line actually of where the cutter was supposed to cut. So then it's just like, oh God, this is terrible. Like, I'm just noticing this right now. I'm actually looking at it like this was cut terribly. This is a terrible product. Like, oh my God, if I did this, I would have gotten fired. Holy crap. So not only is it a badly designed cover, but like it's not cut properly. Oh God, that's embarrassing. I mean, whatever. This DVD came out in what, 2003? Like, obviously 20 years ago. Yeah, no, I think it doesn't really matter at this point. I'm just not a fan of how it looks. It looks very cheap. Like, I genuinely didn't think people would know about this movie just because the cover makes me think like, oh, this is like an underground forgotten movie. But then you look on Letterboxd and it has a banner. So that tells me that, you know, some people know about it. And I mean, the fact that it has a Letterboxd page tells me that people know of it. The only features that come with it are trailers, where you get a trailer for this movie that lies and says that it's like the funniest movie of the year. Obviously, trailers kind of have to do that. And then there's a trailer for Doctor Strangelove. So obviously, even the DVD knows that people are going to make comparisons to Doctor Strangelove when they watch this movie. And then there was this trailer for a movie called Don't Raise the Bridge, Lower the River. And it was like a Jerry Lewis movie. And it had a section of the trailer where like Jerry Lewis is just speaking in this offensive Chinese accent. And I'm like, oh, okay. So you can see where the movie has its priorities straight. Very weird trailer to include for this DVD, but whatever. I guess to wrap up this discussion on The Mouse That Roared, yeah, not impressed. Not impressed with this DVD, not impressed with the movie. I mean, really, like it's movies like this it's movies like this that made me start this podcast in the first place. So I could finally get to these movies. You know, they're just sitting there in my collection, just collecting dust, doing nothing. It's like I gotta get through them so then I can decide, all right, do I want this? Do I not want this? And yeah, I don't want this. It's not staying in my collection. It's out the door. I did not like this movie. I don't like this DVD. It's gone. It's gone. Okay, that about does it. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for hearing me ramble about Stranger Things Season 2 and The Mouse That Roared. Two very different things that I think nobody would have expected to see an episode on, where those two are featured in the same episode. So, there you have it. Alright, thank you all for dropping by, but now it's time to say goodbye. And always remember, I don't know, what does Elle say in Stranger Things Season 2? Bitchin'? Isn't that like the tagline of the season? Yeah, bitchin'. Isn't that funny when the child says the bitch word? Isn't that funny? I think that's funny. I'm just kidding. I don't think that's funny. I think it's forced and contrived. Okay, bye. See you next time.